children are selected. They're a selective sponge. But that's not true either, for an interesting reason. Certain beliefs have a strange status. And maybe religious beliefs fall in this category. So Scott Atran says, in a response to some attacks on religious beliefs by the sort of so-called new atheists, says they shouldn't be taking these beliefs literally. Certain core religious beliefs, like poetic metaphors, are literally senseless in that they altogether lack truth conditions. That is, there is no logical or empirical criteria for judging whether such utterances are true or not. Now, I don't think that that's right. I don't think it's entirely right. People insist these beliefs are true. They teach them to their children. They believe that at least some of them should be taught to all children. They are defensive when people try to teach other beliefs about children. Here's one of my favorite Onion headlines. But I think Atran is right pointing out the special status of religious belief, something also pointed out by the philosopher Dan Dennett, which is that people are strangely reflective about these religious beliefs. So this is a point also remarked by the sociologist Alan Wolf. So Wolf writes, there are people who believe often passionately in God, even if they can't tell others all that much about the God in which they believe. And I think what we're seeing here is what one could call double deference. So people defer to experts when deciding which beliefs to adopt. But also, people defer to experts as to the precise content of the belief and or the grounds for believing it, sometimes known as the division of cognitive labor. What I want to suggest is that this is not special to religion, that it also shows up in science and morality. So do science. Think to yourself for a second, how old is the Earth? Well, I know how old the Earth is. It is 4.54 billion years old. I know this because I looked it up in Wikipedia. I have no idea how they came to that number. But now that I know that's a number, I'm pretty confident it's true. So if any of you believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, I would laugh at you for your ignorance, even though I have no idea why that number up there is correct. But I believe it because although I don't know the grounds for it, I trust the people who tell me it. I trust the scientists who presumably write the Wikipedia pages, one hopes. And there's other beliefs that have, so this is the Canadian data again. And people who study religious belief and so on, psychologists are fascinated by people in the first two categories and talk about why do people believe this. But let's look closely at the people who believe humans evolved through natural selection. And I will tell you the one thing we know about the 58% of people in Canada who think humans evolved through natural selection. The vast majority have no idea what natural selection is. If you ask them to describe it, they would say, well, you know, things evolve. And then when you push them on it, like you ask them, so how did the giraffe's neck get so long? Either they would have no idea, or they would propose a view that there's some sort of mysterious evolutionary force that across the course of generations stretches out the giraffe's neck to satisfy its need to reach tall fruit. A view associated, of course, not with Darwin, but Lamarck. So why, then, what determines whether you believe that God created animals in their current form, or whether animals evolved through natural selection? I think the answer has nothing to do with what you know. I mean, for some people, for some small proportion of scientists or theists, it might. But for the vast majority of us, it reduces to the question of who we trust. Do you trust religious figures or do you trust scientific figures? Take an example, a moral example now. And this is my favorite moral example. It was Lynn Westmoreland, who was a congressman, and he advocated that the Ten Commandments should be on display in government buildings. He then had the misfortune to show up on a television program known as the Colbert Report, where Stephen Colbert plays sort of a faux conservative and asked him various questions. And in the course of this, he got a question he could have never expected to get for his entire life. And I'll show you the clip if the sound works for this.
I think if we were totally without them, we may lose a sense of our direction. What are the Sabbaths? You want me to name them all? Yeah. Don't lie. Don't steal.
Now, so two things. First thing, the day after his representatives say this cut was unfairly edited, and he made it through 5. The second thing is he was ridiculed for what it was said to be hypocrisy. I don't think this is hypocrisy at all. I think he really did view the Ten Commandments as important, and that people should also view them as important, though he didn't know what they were. But this is a form of double deference. The same way, I think it's very important that people believe in natural selection, even though it's possible I really don't really know exactly what natural selection is. There are other examples. This is a nice study done by Jeffrey Cohen, where he asked different groups of Americans about different welfare policies. One of them, the top one, was by American standards insanely generous. The second one, the bottom one, is by American standards insanely stingy. They were either, the Americans given these policies and asked to judge them were either Republican or Democrat, and they were told that they were either thought up by a Republican or a Democrat. It turned out that the actual facts about these policies had little force on whether or not they accepted them. What determined whether they accepted them was somebody of their same party endorsing them. Importantly, nobody later knew that this was why they endorsed them. They defended them on the merits once they were asked about them, not being aware that it was a congruence in political party that was driving their intuition. A final moral example, this is the evolution of Barry Bonds, is steroids. A graduate student of mine, Isaac Giroudi, was very interested in certain moral intuitions. He took it upon himself to ask, what do people have against steroids? If you ask people, are use of steroids wrong? They say they definitely are. People will rank them worse than betting on a game that you yourself are involved in, and they believe they should have criminal penalties. Isaac was simply interested in the question, why? What do people think is wrong? And it turned out he spent 2 years of an otherwise distinguished graduate career finding no answer at all to this question. He must have done dozens of experiments. So, for instance, some people would say, well, they destroy your body. They're very bad for you. They destroy your body. They give you heart conditions and so on. So, okay. And then you ask another group, okay, so there's a new form of steroid that comes out, and it doesn't destroy your body. It doesn't do anything bad to your body. In fact, it gives you immunity to colds, and you're better. It's still exactly as wrong. Some people say, well, it's cheating because it's illegal. Okay, what if it was legal? Still be wrong. He came to the conclusion, which I think is right, that people think steroids are wrong because people think steroids are wrong. In other words, which isn't as circular as it sounds, people, for whatever reason, there's sort of an idea that steroids are wrong. Other people notice that other people believe steroids are wrong, and they assume steroids are wrong. Just in the same way that when running shoes were first introduced, they were viewed as a form of cheating. And now nobody believes that anymore. So things change just because people monitor community standards. I've suggested that religious belief is a product of universal and near universal tendencies. Is a product of, for the universal tendencies, foundational stances that shape our common sense understanding of the world. And for the differences, they're largely due to deference, often double deference, to trusted authorities. I think this holds much the same for scientific belief. That our scientific beliefs, our intuitive scientific beliefs, are grounded either in our common sense understanding or deference, sometimes double deference, to authority. And I think this holds as well for moral belief. I think the same considerations hold. And in my talk tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about these foundational stances that are operative in our moral psychologies. Now, it might look at this point that I'm saying science and religion and morality are all the same. And this is actually not my view. I think in particular, science and religion have rather an irredeemable clash against each other. I think because the actual methods and procedures of science differ from those of religion. So I think that there is, in fact, a difference. But I do think, so I don't think that, but I do think that. I think that in the heads of non-experts, folk science, folk religion, and folk morality come from the same psychological sources. Or to put it more succinctly, there's nothing special about religion. Thank you.